But first, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has arrived in New York, where he will use this week's United Nations General Assembly meeting to recognise a state of Palestine.
Well, I'm very proud to be representing Australia at the United Nations this week. This is the first time I've been here as Prime Minister. It's an opportunity to advance Australia's economic, national security and, of course, our related environmental interests as well. Well, what we want to see is increased peace and security and stability around the world.
But allies of Donald Trump, whom the PM is hoping to meet this week, are warning Albanese that Australia could face punitive measures if he follows through with his plan.
Yeah, an open letter from 25 Republicans, including Ted Cruz, accuses the Prime Minister of recklessness and of imperiling the security of Australian civilians. It said the Albanese government's decision to recognise Palestine, quote, sets the dangerous precedent that violence and diplomacy is the most expedient means for terrorist groups like Hamas to achieve their political aims. And it warned that proceeding with recognition will put your country at odds with long-standing US policy and interests and may invite punitive measures in response.
But Energy Minister Chris Bowen said the government would not be dissuaded.
We obviously have set Australia's foreign policy based on our interests and our values. And while everyone's entitled to their views, we will determine Australian foreign policy, not anyone else. And we've determined a couple of things: that the time is right, in concert, as you said, with like-minded countries. We've been waiting 80 years for a two-state solution, and that we now see recognising Palestine as a step towards the two-state solution, not the result of negotiations. And to your question, I believe that Israel will be truly free and secure when Palestine is.
That's the absolute worst explanation for what is a shocking decision. We've determined the time is right. Based on what? The fact there's only 48 hostages still being held? Perhaps that's better than 60, in which case they wouldn't have recognised Palestine. Who knows? And as for the argument, we will determine our own foreign policy, that's not even the question. The question is, why do they have this foreign policy? The time is right. Why? According to whom and according to what? And as for the Prime Minister saying, I'm here at the United Nations to call for global peace and security, this is a Prime Minister who was kicked out of his own electorate office by pro-Palestinian protesters, calling for world security and peace. I mean, Anthony Albanese's got to hide. And as I said, recognising Palestine when they still have 48 Jews held hostage in Gaza. It's interesting, Danica,
yes.
Just today Hamas released a poster showing photos of the 48 hostages still being held with the caption, parting image. So that's what Hamas thinks of the West right now. They're not afraid, they're not intimidated, they're not chastised, they're being rewarded for their terrorism.
Well, don't forget a couple of weeks ago when the Prime Minister first said that he would indeed recognise a Palestinian statehood. Remember who gave him a pat on the back in the first instance? Of course, it was Hamas. So, once again, the Hamas hates the West. Yet you've got leaders like Anthony Albanese, along with France, the UK and Canada, will all be going to the United Nations this week to recognise a Palestinian statehood. So, well done, betraying values on the world stage. And the only group who benefits from this is Hamas. But let's be clear about this. This doesn't just betray Jewish Australians, James. This actually betrays all of our values. This is certainly not what we stand for, not whatsoever in this country. Yet, once again, we see this hypocrisy from Labor. Remember, he's let in 3,000 Gazans with little to no security checks. There are reports that he's going to bring in ISIS brides by Christmas, but never mind, go to the UN. And don't forget that this could actually be illegal according to international law. There were a number of British lawyers that came out recently and said, well, simply because there's no functioning single government there right now, that it would be illegal to do so, and the fact that Hamas actually runs the Gaza Strip.
There's no defined territory.
There's no defined territory. So you go, well, why are you doing this? Anthony Albanese is clearly doing this to live out his boyhood fantasies.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
You've got the UK Prime Minister saying, well, we want to work towards a two-state solution. Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution.
And polling in the UK shows 9 out of 10 Brits don't believe a two-state solution should be given at this point.
Well, that's it. And you've got France saying, well, we want Israel and Palestine to live side by side in peace. peace. Well, Hamas doesn't want peace.
Well, and Chris Bowen, you heard him say there, Israel will be secure when Palestine is free, except that's not what the protesters say.
No.
They say from the river to the sea. It's not what Hamas say. Hamas say we will do this again and again. And it's not what the Palestinian authorities say, because they still refuse to recognise a state of Israel. So the government is delusional, but I think you're right. This is an ideological stance that Anthony Albanese has had for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, as Prime Minister, he's fulfilling his dreams rather than doing what's in the best interests of our ally in the Middle East, Israel, and in terms of security here in Australia. There's no question those Republicans who wrote that letter saying not only is he doing the wrong thing morally by Israel, but he's imperiling security in Australia by rewarding terrorism. I don't think you can argue with that based on what we've seen since October 7 in our country over the last couple of years.
Well, it just goes to show we're moving further away from our closest ally in the United States, not just on Israel policy, but obviously AUKUS is now up in the air, defence is now up in the air. I remember there was this delay in Australia recognising or agreeing with the fact that the US took hold of Iran's nuclear facility a couple of months ago. We didn't even come out with a comment. It took us days to even put a position on it, even though the US is our closest ally. So I'm actually not surprised that the US came out with that statement.
And just one more thing, you heard Anthony Albanese say we're a trusted ally and security partner. Well, not according to Vanuatu, not according to Papua New Guinea.
That was a failure this week.
So he's on the tarmac there in New York, just absolutely dribbling, and we all know that it just doesn't stack up.
No, it certainly doesn't. But look,